Hopefully next week, I have a lot of videos for you. I've been grinding the Prophecy Dungeon, multiple roles to showcase. I got dozens of weapons. I can't wait. But honestly, as far as launch week of the dungeon, I spent a good amount of time, like hours, trying to figure out this perk right here, Crossing Over. So this video is an entirely just over explanation of Crossing Over. It's been a while since I've gotten really nerdy with it, and I actually had a good time. So I feel I am very close, about 95% confident. There's a couple things I just don't know. And of course, until Bungie confirms and outright says what it does, I hope that they do take it with a grain of salt. But I feel really good about it. And with all these roles, another thing, I had to find exact stat splits to get the numbers to figure it out. It took a long time. Crossing Over. This weapon has increased range and handling at the top half of the magazine, while rounds on the bottom half of the magazine deal increased damage. And instead of reviewing these weapons, which I started to, I was starting with the SMG, I got to this and it just really bothered me that I didn't know how it worked. I wasn't going to say, oh, the damage doesn't feel good or the range feels great. None of that. I didn't want to do that, so I didn't. It's not how I roll. So keep in mind, get where I am, like I tried various numbers, percentages. I'm not going to go through those, but I will go through where it all ended up. That's the most important thing. And it's actually really cool how this perk ends up. At least I think so. Visually, think of Crossing Over like this. A V, or a roller coaster. Well, for right now, think of it like this. I'm going to show you a little bit of what it actually is and turns into. We start at the top left, we go down, we ride the wave, we get to the middle point, and we start climbing to the top right. It's weird how each section of this works, but when you put the whole thing together, the whole magazine, it's pretty cool. So I want to start with the easy part, the bottom half of the magazine. With your weapon on the top half, light is going to be on the screen. As your mag goes down, you switch from light to dark in Crossing Over. With dark, you start ramping up damage as you get to the end of the magazine. So this damage has an end goal of 3%. And your mag size matters, but not how you would think it would. Easy example is Judgment. We have 9 rounds. It deals 2152. The first shot of dark, once it gets to that bottom half, it goes to 2201. Then the 2201 scales and a couple times, and it just ends at 2217. So 2152 to 2217, 3% more damage. But what about a larger mag size? 14 rounds instead of 9. How does that work? With 14 starting, you get more time with dark. The first damage boost is 2,192. Just so we're clear, that's less damage than what the 9-round mag did when it started its dark. It hit for 2201, this is 2192. So a little bit less, but it's the same deal. It scales, it ramps, it has the end goal of 2217, just like before, the 3%. And the same goes with the Crucible. But remember, PvP, it's got a lot of rounding. Like in the new sandbox, the crit 77, at the end, the dark mag will get to 78, 79. 80. But in the old sandbox, it goes from 70 to 71, 72, that 3% area, that endpoint. Same with the SMG. 28 round mag, easy. 14 rounds at the top, 14 rounds in the back. The top half, 787. First bullet of dark is 801. Then we end up at 811. It just takes a long time. Those 14 bullets go in 801, 2, 3, 4, 6, 7. It completes the scale to 3% more damage. So if you have something like Overflow, it's just going to scale slowly all the way to that 3%. But that brings us to the top half of the magazine. You get increased range and handling at the top half, the light part. So to set this up easy, visual example, we have a Judgment with a 10-round magazine. The first 5 rounds are light, the last 5 are dark. So let's bring up that V. 5 rounds at the top, 5 rounds at the end. We have the midpoint of the Crossing Over. Once that 5th bullet starts, it starts ramping up damage. And I tried all numbers, so many things, and I'm pretty confident here. So as far as range, the first bullet is plus 10 range. Keeping in mind, the bullet is the first bullet of a freshly reloaded magazine. With a 10-round mag, the 10th bullet, the first one, is plus 10 range. But this also has scaling. While testing it, it never just dropped to no range or plus 1 range. When it switched over to dark, it kept range. So I'm going to show you the final test to confirm this as I went through everything, but the last bullet of light gives plus 5 range, and the bullets in between scale. So with that Judgment example, the first bullet plus 10 range, second one plus 9, then plus 7, plus 6, then plus 5, plus 5. It just stops at plus 5 range. Then you go to dark. So another way to look at it, no matter what in the top half of the magazine, you're always getting at least plus 5 range, but your first few shots are that plus 10, plus 9. It's a big deal. It's good. Really, really good. And at the end of the video, I'll show you why and how. But to confirm that, I got a Waking Vigil of 54 range, and I walked off that 54 range for its fall off to go from 70 to 69, and then importantly 68. So we have 54 range at a fall off point of 68 damage. On the Judgment, we have 49 range. So that means with Crossing Over, plus 10 range, it'd be 59, but in half, the plus 5 is 54. So it's just like that Waking Vigil. So the first shots are 70, which we knew That's light kicking in. But as I'm getting to crossing over that range, going down the magazine, it goes to 69. And on that final bullet, the +5 range, right at 68, just like the Waking Vigil. Same points of fall off. And after that, you're going to notice that it stays at 68, and that's what's really cool. The damage part is keeping up the effective range. More on that in a second on how that's going together, but let's go back to that visual, that V. It's more like this. It's more like starting off with +10 range, getting down to +5 range, and then crossing over to up the damage to that 3% to get you back to the point of what the +10 range was giving you. Really, really cool. We'll come back to it. But then we have the handling. So the handling was the hardest part because I'm not sure if it's just a straight handling bump or if it's an animation scaler, like a 0.95. I don't know. With what I tested, whatever it is, it equates to at the top half of the mag, that first bullet, +15 handling. I assume it goes down just like the range, meaning all the way in light. It maybe like just caps out or bottoms out at +10 handling, +7 handling. But if you've used these weapons, you know that your ADS is better, your handling is better. It's a very noticeable part of the weapon. In the end, I'm not confident in the handling scaling, but fairly certain you start off with the equivalence of +15 handling. So that's good. But here's the cool part, how it rides that wave. It makes me think of the lore of the game itself, because how this perk works, sometimes light's going to help you out a little bit, meaning you're just outside of range on something. It's giving you a little extra range to help out. Or sometimes dark is going to help that extra damage. Maybe crossing a TTK threshold, maybe you're outside of range and it's helping keep your damage up to get more of a better number to where you're not just bad fall off. Like, it's really, really cool. Just a little extra damage here or there, a little bit extra range. But in reality, when you see the wave in action, the important part, if you're in the direct center of this perk of crossing over, meaning this judgment deals 2,152, we talked about it before, and you're maximizing the top half of the magazine, the +10 range. It's doing its max damage. But after that, no matter what, the range is going to go down, the damage is going to go up. So we start having fall off, 2152, 2136, 2103, 77, 84. But it ends at 2098, and 2098 is 38 damage off of its original damage. So that line, as I've said, sometimes the light part comes up, sometimes the dark part comes up. It's beneficial, but that middle part, that crossing over, when you think about the full magazine start to finish, it's almost like the same thing as they say.
The line between light and dark is so very thin.
So for these weapons, some perks mean a little bit more. Some things for you to think about, like let's take Keep Away. It's on Prosecutor, it's on Relentless. The perk gives +10 range. Well, counting the origin trait, it's actually +20 range, right? The first half of that magazine, the first bullet is 20 range. But if you're in the light part, it's always going to be at least +15 range, which is huge. Then after that, the damage part of the origin trait and the bottom half is keeping you in the range that you want to be in. It's really, really cool. It's a very cool perk. There's sudden death. All shots in PvP starting off with dark. It's a little bit more damage. And again, there's a lot of rounding that goes on, but all that's going to be for another day. But I wanted to get this one out, try to help explain what this thing does. And as you're grinding for perks, as you're grinding for rolls, you can keep all this in mind. So I appreciate your time. I'm doing good on Tuesday. I have a follow-up on my implanted monitor with my cardiologist. We go from there. So I do appreciate all of your comments. There's well over 1,000 of them and I read them all. Thank you, and I appreciate you. If you're new here, remember to hit the subscribe button. And if you are subscribed, thank you so much for your support. Let's talk about these dungeon weapons and, more importantly, crossing over this origin trait. How do you feel about it? Thank you for watching, and until the next one, I am CoolGuy.